what we shall now have the opportunity to hear from the motion and the amendment, and we will then move into debate. I will briefly cover how this works for those that do not. In a moment, I will speak to the motion and I will ask my seconder likewise. We will then hear from Mohammed on his amendment and Mark who will second it. At that point, we will move into debate. Any member may speak in debate for up to minutes. Once the debate is concluded, which will happen once there are no other contributions, we will hear summing up of the amendment motion, we'll then move to the vote. And thank you. It gives me pleasure to move the amended motion in front of us today, which calls on us to approve the revised financial regulations, Appendix A, the revised reserve policy at Appendix B, and to accept the inclusion of sensitivity analysis for future budgetary forecasting. It is right and proper that we look to continuously review regulations that underpin the foundations for the financial decisions that we take as an IJB. I think the revisions that we have before us today are right and proper. They take account of the IJB's current position, and they take account of good governance and good practice for financial stewardship. It is important that as custodians of funds for public good, we are assured in the decisions we are taking and of the impact they will have not only for decisions themselves, but somebody used the word consequences earlier on, and I think it's very apt that we take that into consideration as well. The sensitivity testing, which Amy has suggested and which I am moving that we take account of in future forecasting, will allow us to do that. It will give us a broader overview of what the potential outcomes of decisions would be and the various options that are available to us as an IJB, and it will aid in accountability and transparency. I believe these are reasonable measures that reasonable stewardship would expect us to take, and I humbly therefore ask you to support the motion in my name.
Yeah, I should be brief. In an ideal world, I think we should have reserves, and I think we should be looking to build up reserves over the long term. But if the amendment is asking for us to build up at least £5 million worth of reserves in this financial year, I have to ask the question, where's the money coming from? We're going to have to cut £5 million of expenditure on something else. What are we going to cut? Who's going to suffer as a result? Which frontline services are going to suffer? So on that basis, I can't possibly support the amendment. And also, I would point out, as Amy answered to my question earlier, the majority of IJBs across Scotland don't have any reserves left. We're all in the same boat for exactly the same reason, which would be the huge growth costs of adult social care and a growth in prescribing costs. So, as I say, can't support the amendment. I support the motion, and I'll leave it at that.
Mohammed.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I would like to thank Mark for seconding me. I think it is a great move, Mark, that we broke this charter, just agreed, and for transparency and for accountability, it is very important that we debate here in this house and discuss all of the matter, and we can get out of the mess we are having at the moment financially. And I do not feel any embarrassment if I do not get anybody to second me. Very proudly, I moved the amendment, and I will be moving again and again. Just I remain optimistic that you will leave this organization as opposed to what your vice chair did when he was chair, and that was to be led, which has, in my opinion, caused so much damage to this once very well respected IJB, because the recruit does not understand the process, because we already had a question and answer session, which he asked. He said that question can be asked. We raised question, and thanks to Amy, we had a very good responses, and I'm very happy with the answer we received from Amy. However, I thought my amendment will be agreed. Here we go. I'm not moving against our financial regulations or our result policy. I am saying is that as part of that policy, officers should be reminded as part of their next financial update to start work toward this IGP having minimum $5 billion and reserve by the end of 2025 or 26. I thought we will agree. Here we go. Actually, I think I understand it will be difficult to build up reserve, especially when we are predicting another deficit in our budget this year and of course next year. The report state at 4.5 the IGB was not in many reserves, and therefore there will be no risk that for use in 26 and also 27 financial year based on the current financial forecast. This is unacceptable. Therefore, we must agree to must work toward having a minimum reserve of $5 billion at the end of 2025 or 26. And as such, we should instruct Chief Finance Officer to report within the next financial update. How the IGB will start to work toward having a minimum reserve of $5 billion by the end of 2025. An organization such as the IGB requires to have reserve policy. Thus, it also requires to have policy to build up our reserve. All my amendment does is instruct Chief Finance Officer as part of the finance reporting to build it and thinking how we can go about having $5 billion reserve in my opinion, do nothing to accept that. They would not have reserve and next year. And out the wrong message, and I'm keen to ensure that the message is positive as possible, giving financial climate. But thank you very much once again. My person.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. And can I just very gently ask if you could maybe speak up just a little bit to your summing up, just so the folks online can hear. And Mark, to second the amendment, please.
Understanding that I'm not supposed to speak at second of the amendment, is that correct?
Okay.
Would I be correct in that?
Yes, formally second. You won't have to. Yes.
No.
If you formally second, yes.
You are entitled to speak in support if you wish to, but you're not.
Okay. So if I'm entitled then to speak, I will do. And the reason that I seconded this motion, I think that I agree with Carl Kamara that having open, transparent discussions is very important within our IGB. I note that the wording is that we will start to work towards having a minimum. That doesn't necessarily mean that we will get to a minimum, but we at least have some framework that we can start to work towards. Hence the reason that I second the amendment on that basis alone. Thank you.
We'll now enter debate and speeches will 5 minutes. All right. Does anyone wish to? Richie?
Yeah, thanks. And I think from my perspective, I suspect none of us around the table would be against having a reserve. I think having a reserve is a good thing to do. It's a good thing to have. My slight anxiety, yes, about I know it's up to $5 billion rather than $5 billion itself a year is that 2 points, I guess. Yeah, one is that that additional work on top of a very challenging position, I think, for the capacity and officer to deliver the savings set out, which are substantial. that will be that potentially undermine our ability to achieve those savings. So I'm concerned that would have a negative impact in that sense. The medium term framework set out that Amy's described, I think is really helpful in terms of getting to a position where we're ready to start accumulate reserves. So again, I think I'd be very happy for that to be re-emphasised, if you like, in terms of getting to a place where you get financial balance and then are able to build up some reserves at that right moment in time. Would be 100% behind that. And the other point, I guess, is if we do get to a position in, sorry, one other point before that, if we can overachieve in the savings in year, then that's a great thing to do as well. I guess it's to reduce the reliance on parents, if I can call them that, in terms of the funding that they are over and above, I guess, providing bonds to deal with the pressures. But if we were to, let's say, we had £5 million reserves secured this year, would that not, there's a question behind this, would that not mean that Aberdeen City Council Pensions Grant could say, well, hang on a minute, we're giving you £10 million to help you out this year, and you've got £5 million in reserve? Is it not the case that should go back as the first point of contact to the parents rather than sit on the books, if you like? So that's a bit of a concern for me, but if I can respond to that, would be helpful. So I'm totally sympathetic with the principle of how to get to the house, how quickly we get there, and what the consequence of almost pushing that too hard at this point in time might be.
Thank you very much. Just for clarity, Mohammed will have the opportunity to answer any questions as he wishes during some. Anyone else for debate? Okay, that being the case, Mohammed,
Thanks very much,
sum up
Chair.
your amendment.
Just to make it absolutely clear that any member of IGP can speak for or against the amendment. And if you like to second any amendment just by saying formally second, then you don't have to speak. If you like to just support the amendment or even end up the agenda, if you're going to vote against amendment, yet you can get opportunity to speak. It is a democratic system. It is very important for transparency and accountability. I have done so many times in Aberdeen City Council, formally seconded independent councillor to have a healthy debate, listen to views of other councillors, and I think this is a great start. I'm absolutely delighted. It's not a win or lose. I'm not interested in who is going to win and who is going to lose. We can have a proper accountability. We can have a proper democratic system where somebody can challenge. I mean, I don't have to challenge anything. If everything is fine, if everything is going in the right direction, if we have no issue at all, why would we be moving amendment? I will be supporting. I will say agree, yes. But this is just custom in our IGP. It's not a healthy democratic policy that we just agree regardless. We see there are some serious issues. I mean, it was shocked for myself when Vice Chair said that he was not speaking about the IGP's quarters second. We clearly discussed in our City Council about when we found out that we are having financial difficulties, and we discussed at our finance and resources committee meeting. And then this was a question raised in relation to the quarter second. And this, I think thanks to Emmy, you already clarified that this issue first time arose to them in January. This was absolutely after the quarter second. Quarter two, we did not get anything that we're having some financial difficulties and it will be 10 million black hole. We didn't get a figure. All of a sudden, quarter three was very difficult for us. And once again, I would like to thank Mark. And as I said, it is a great start that at least we are going in the right direction. We are here accountable, and for accountability and transparency, amazing. Thank you so much. And I do my amendment. I ask all members that what I'm asking is very straightforward. But it would agree that we must work together toward having a minimum reserve of 5 million pounds. I don't think it's not. By the end of 2025, 2026. Therefore, instruct Chief Finance Officer to report with them at next financial update, asking for update. But we can move forward towards the achieving 5 billion result. So once again, thank you very much, Mark and all members for your contribution. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah, for summing up. And as I say, it gives me pleasure to sum up for the motion and the amended recommendations before us. But my comments from submitting the motion stand, but I would just like to touch on a couple of points. Firstly, I thank Mohammed for the amendment. I have sympathy with 2.1 and 2.4 statements of fact. I have equal concerns around 2.5 in that it sets up for expectation of officers and for the IGB for a future which is financially uncertain. I would, however, submit that there will be unanimous support for us rebuilding reserves over time. We not want to do that. That seems like a sensible thing to do, just as we do with our own finances. But I think codifying that with numerically as it has, and when we are now starting to move forward without reserves and sensitive financial position moving forward, I would respectfully submit would set us up stations which we might not be able to deliver. I believe that the people we support, staff, supporting financial policy and financial regulations, and we will have built in, as per the amended motion, the reassurance of the sensitivity analysis that will give us even greater scrutiny and transparency. So I thank you for the debate and the contributions. Thank you for the amendment. I respectfully ask you to, before we move to the vote, just because I don't want anyone to feel left out and for clarity of process, I regret that my hands are tied by statute and that only voting members may vote. I do want to be explicitly clear. I make no distinction between whether you are a voting member, non-voting member, any other time. But for this process in particular, there is that distinction. Nevertheless, regardless of who you are or what your role is, what your legal role is, I strongly encourage, as we've seen today, that participation. Just wanted to make that clear, because it would be a glaring omission.
Chair. The board has before it a motion in the name of the chair, an amendment in the name of Councillor Malik. Members, please vote motion, amendment, or no vote. Chair.
Motion.
Vice Chair.
Motion.
Farrell.
Motion.
Councillor Fairfield.
Motion.
Motion. Motion.
Amendment.
Convener, there are 6 votes for the motion and 1 vote for the amendment. The motion therefore carries.
And now to item 6.1, the recruitment and selection process for Chief Finance Officer, pages 95 to 106. We've got Alison Patterson is online. Alison, is there anything you wanted to speak to this paper?
And you know, there's nothing really additional to add to what's set out in the paper and the recommendations.
I propose to move the recommendations on block. Does any member object?
No, great.
Recommendations are on pages 95 to 96. recommended that the Integration Joint Board A notes the job profile attached. 1. B establishes a temporary committee of the IJB to be called an appointment panel, constituting the chair and vice chair of the IJB. The chief officer will act as chair of the appointment panel to interview candidates and make an appointment. B, agree that in the absence of the chair or vice chair of the IGB agrees that a voting member of the IGB in the relevant constituent body substitutes for the chair or vice chair of the IGB at the appointment panel. D, agrees that the appointment of the chief finance officer shall be determined by the appointment panel of the IGB. And E, agrees that the chief officer makes arrangements for an interim chief finance officer should they consider it necessary to do so.
Are we happy to agree the recommendations?
Agreed.
Thank you. And at this point, although Amy, you will be longer, I do want to put a record of my thanks to you and for all the work that you've done. I think we've seen by questioning today that it's very much appreciated. I think it's added a richness and diversity to our debate. So thank you.
Yeah.
And item 6.2. The annual resilience report, inclusion of integration joint boards as category 1 responders under the Civil Contingency Act 2004. So that is item 6.2. We have Alan. Is there anything you want to add, Martin?
No, Chair, just it's the annual assurance report, as I said, which outlines the fulfillment of the duties under that Act. The report outlines those activities and provides information around some of the incidents that the partnership will be involved in, which is in respect to 425. Also outlines training and exercising that's occurred, as well as the development of a partnership generic emergency plan.
Any questions for Martin?
Yeah, it's just on the training where I see that in March last year, we had training on the national power outage. And thinking about the Spain and Portugal issue a couple of weeks ago, just wondered if you could expand on where we're at in terms of coping with something like that.
Yeah, but thank you, and through you, Chair. The Council has set up a national power outage working group following that session last March. So it's met monthly for the last few months, and the partnership's involved in that. So I'm a representative on that, as well as some colleagues in social work. So we have a plan in place, albeit it's in draft form, but we are going through that plan and developing it as we go. And I think you're right, Councillor Cook, the power outage in Spain and Portugal does demonstrate that these things can happen. So the planning will continue, and as I say, that working group is meeting monthly.
Thanks, that's very reassuring to hear.
Amanda, please.
Yep. I was really pleased to read this report that you've actually got a working group, because it's been a thing that's been worrying for a long time, you know, because of the extreme weather and all this sort of thing. So, you know, so pleased that you've got this working group, and hopefully you'll sort of remember that this, you know, people with disabilities, that will be sort of vulnerable. All I wanted to see.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Yeah, absolutely. When any major incident happens, whether that be a storm we've had to deal with over the last few years, or a national planning outage, one of the main strategic aim is to make sure that we are looking at those vulnerable people in the city.
Yeah, because I mean, because the thing is, the power. You know, if there is a power outage, that causes an awful lot of problems, because it might even be that if the mobile phone signal mast goes as well, then you can't contact someone. So it's really important that plant farms get sort of reassured along that lines.
I take my own advice. Ask. Feels like a silly question. Do we involve people we support, particularly on the way fire increased difficulty during events in the practical scenario planning or whatever goes for practical planning. Could you maybe just give some narrative around that, please?
Yes, Chair. So I suppose mentioned the strategic aims. In terms of the National Power Outage Plan that partnerships involved in through the council, there is that kind of identification of the most vulnerable and the services, the most critical services we need to protect. So that is in place. So we're doing that, and we're basing a lot of our planning around that. To answer your question specifically, I think it's a good challenge in terms of actually maybe then in terms of consultation around the planning that we've got, whether we can involve service users, so like take that back into the planning. If that's okay.
If you do, I'm quite happy to be involved. Sorry.
Thank you, Martin. I think there's no shortage of willing hands. I think some of the challenges that Amanda has just referenced maybe come out in that gaming of those scenarios. Any other questions, Martin? Okay. Turn to the recommendations of Page 107. It's recommended that IJP and IJB indicate that they are assured of the duties of the IJB as a Category 1 responder on the Contingencies Act 2004 are being met, as detailed in the report. Are we happy to agree? Agree. Turn now to item 7. I intend to take all of these items on block. Does any member object? So we have the upcoming insights session. Items there, cultural advising, scanning, and deep dive into AI. And I think very usefully, private sector funding, and this comes specifically from some of our partners. And so hopefully you were able to join us. That will take place on the 10th of June, are we content? Agreed. Our next meeting of the formal IJB will take place on 1st of July, are we content? Agreed. Agreed. Thank you. Just before I draw things to a close, a couple of things I want to say. Firstly, some of you will be aware that Shona Owen-Smith is attending her last meeting. Shona has been instrumental in the development and lead on commissioning services for many years. One of her many achievements was the Commissioning Academy, which to all intents and purposes has significantly expanded the understanding of how commissioning works, as well as helping to develop very strong relationships with our commission services that are absolutely essential in providing the high quality that the people we support deserve. So I want to put on record on my behalf, on behalf of the IGP, my thanks to Shona and to wish her well in whatever direction life takes. Last but not least, I just wish to thank you for bearing with me in my first meeting as chair, although that hasn't been too traumatic for all of you. Thank you to those who have contributed to the discussion, to our officers, report authors for their time bringing the information to us, and to those responsible for the admin tech, making sure that that has worked. I note and I genuinely take on board concerns over the audio quality. John, Fiona and I meet regularly. I will be challenging respectfully the art of the possible. Whatever that is, however that is, that we do things in a way that everyone can participate, because I'm aware of the challenges that those online had. Some occasions in the room, it's been difficult. We will actively look at me, and thank you also to Emma for supporting me and keeping me on the straight and narrow. Wish you all a very pleasant remainder of the day. See you all next meeting. Those who have taken time to watch back meeting after the fact, I hope it's interesting. It's just